Maphaile stunned the audience. ANC General Secretary Fikile Mbalula almost fell from his chair when Maphaile reaffirms what Kalni House has been saying all along, that President Cyril Ramaphosa during the CODESA negotiations didn't negotiate in good faith. Instead, he made ANC compromise a lot, sacrifice a lot. At the end of the day, there was nothing that ANC or black people gained on that negotiations. Please listen to this clip.
Now, these negotiators, because they are treacherous in nature, have decided to betray this revolution. Now they want to take it from the back door. We will never allow this revolution to go astray. We will never allow this revolution to be stolen. And this time, they better be warned. We will never accept unjust settlement. That is why this revolution has to be defended.
The ANC negotiators, led by Cyril Ramaphosa, was selling out the liberation ideals that he and so many other comrades had dedicated their lives to, that so many comrades died, that when Comrade Chris articulated those concerns, and the videos are there on YouTube and on Google.
President Cyril Ramaphosa and Mr. Roof Mayor, they are respected and honored for the leading role they played during CODESA negotiations and to the creation of the new constitution of this country. However, if you listen to this clip that I'm about to play carefully, you'll notice that MK veterans, as well as ordinary members of an ANC and some leaders of the ANC, they are not happy with the negotiated settlement and they are pushing for the second CODESA. Please watch this clip.
Other ways, as a consequence of the negotiated settlement, the victims of colonialism and apartheid, the victims of white minority rule, the victims of colonial capitalism in our country, subjected themselves to an unjust process for the sake of peace, because we wanted democracy in which we can gain political power in the hands of the majority, who can then begin to transform their lives. That's what happened. Now, those we negotiated this unjust outcome with, that is why, by the way, the Communist Party called that period the 1994 democratic breakthrough as a consequence of Comrade Hani's death, when we demanded through President Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress leading this process, the date for elections. This date for elections that we are now continuing with other elections is literally written with the blood of a communist martyr, representing many other martyrs of our revolution who died for the freedom and democracy that we enjoy today. But with this consequence, comrades, those we negotiated with have betrayed the negotiations, because ourselves, in the name of peace, we made compromises in this period. One of those compromises, for instance, well, let me put it this way. As commanders in war, when you defeat your enemy after a battle, you command a situational report to understand what's happening. Commander Atu, this is our commander of Umkhonto weSizwe. When you command a situational report, you disarm first the enemy. In other words, you suppress all instruments of oppression of the enemy. That's why the first task is to disarm the enemy and have the enemy under your control. In that way, you can then unleash your own program. With the negotiated transition, we were not able to do that. The transition became long. We negotiated for too long, even when we were in government. Now, these negotiators, because they are treacherous in nature, have decided to betray this revolution. Now they want to take it from the back door. We will never allow this revolution to go astray. We will never allow this revolution to be stolen. And this time, they better be warned. We will never accept unjust settlement.
Comrade Chris was clear. CODESA was a sell-out project to create the false hope that the negotiating process will eventually bring full liberation, which it did not.
We are actually only now going into a peaceful transition. We haven't done it properly in 1994. We lied to one another. Ons was te versigtig. Now the real transition is taking place.
Committees of the ANC. Remember, the negotiations started with Thabo Mbeki as being the chief negotiator and Jacob Zuma being the head of intelligence. When both Jacob Zuma and Thabo Mbeki were outside the country, actually traveling with President Nelson Mandela, Ramaphosa called a meeting of the National Executive. He used those friends and cronies of his who he had brought into the NEC to pull off a coup. They removed Thabo Mbeki as the chief negotiator for the CODESA negotiations. They removed Jacob Zuma as the head of intelligence. And Ramaphosa imposed himself as the head of negotiations from hence on. That was always the plan. And that plan unfolded beautifully for them once he managed to pull off that coup in the National Executive Committee of the ANC. And then he formed a very, very close, insidious relationship with the chief negotiator of the National Party, Rolf Meyer. And between the two of them, they made the secret deals, they made the arrangements behind the scenes, and then they came and presented those deals, those arrangements in the public domain of CODESA. They manipulated the situation, and eventually we ended up with this deeply flawed constitution that we have today, with a negotiating process that granted the on earth. Do you guarantee property rights in a country where you know the colonial history of this country is that white colonists came to South Africa and stole the land from the indigenous people?
This is how Comrade Chris felt about Rolf Meyer, who is now President Ramaphosa's advisor.
I disagree with a lot of people who think that de Klerk and others have changed. Because de Klerk and others have done nothing about removing the forces that they created. It's not just Hammer, Van der Vestes, and Gert, Hugo, or whatever his name. It is those people who strategized and worked out the strategies and tactics of destroying us. De Klerk, Rolf Meyer, Adrian Flock, Magnus Malan, Big Potter, who were in the center of the strategy of killing people, in the State Security Council. And therefore, that's why some of us have got reservation about the amnesty they are talking about. Before you consider an amnesty, let us see what they did. When we were coming back, they forced us to fill forms to say, what did we do? And I think that should apply to them as well.